happy to moderate this discussion on a timely subject, recipe for a smoke-free Europe, learnings from the Swedish experience, and looking at the potential of learning from what could be called the Swedish model. Very happy to be hosted here by MEP Tomislav Sokol. He's a little bit late, but he should arrive any moment. And this is hosted by We Are Innovation, and Federico Fernández from We Are Innovation is here as well. Today is, I think, as most of you know, World No Tobacco Day. There's one country that is in all likelihood no longer going to have to celebrate this day next year, and that is Sweden. That's one of the reasons also to focus on Sweden. Sweden that at the moment has smoking prevalence already down to 5.6%, very close to 5%, which means that it's smoke-free. Now, what we will do is first we'll have a small introduction and a few introductory remarks by a number of MEPs from across the spectrum. So maybe I will already ask them to move to the stage. As said, Mr. Sokol will arrive any moment, but we have Sara Skyttedal from Sweden, from the EPP, and Johan Nissinen from the ECR. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to discuss this topic for about 5 minutes, and after that, Federico Fernández will present the Ipsos report study that has been conducted. So please, Sarah.
Well, now it works. Thank you very much. Hope the sound will get better. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this event and for arranging it on this quite crucial topic. There was once a famous Swedish politician that said that politics is about will. And I think even if that is true, I would still like to say that I think European politics today is primarily about prioritizing, about choosing what is truly important and what is secondary. And I think that this runs through many policy topics. And I would like to give another example outside of the scope of discussion today, because I am also a full member of the Industry Committee, where we have one of the big issues right now about Critical Raw Materials Act, where the goal is to ensure that EU member states become less dependent on China when it comes to critical materials, and that we should achieve this by making it easier to use our own critical raw materials here in Europe. Meanwhile, at the same time, we in the Industry Committee are working to achieve this. The Environmental Committee is working on legislation that goes in the opposite direction, with, for example, the Nature Restoration Law, which would make it more difficult for mining industry to operate in Europe. So Europe's decision maker needs to choose, and I think we have to say that there is one goal that is more important than the other, and you cannot pick every goal, especially when they are contradictory. So politics, like life in general, I think is about choosing. So what does this have to do with today's conversation, you might wonder? And I would say quite a lot, actually. A conclusion in nicotine and tobacco policy that European decision making must take to heart is that the fight against addiction and the fight against cancer and hazardous diseases might not be compatible with one another. And we must choose which one of these that are more important. And I think we cannot pretend that this area is without conflict of different aims and goals. And I think the goal, if we want to fight tobacco-related mortality, is to get people to stop smoking cigarettes. Because cigarettes actually kill people. So how to do this? And I can tell you how we are not achieving this. It will not lower the rate of tobacco-related mortality by over-regulating products that have a serious potential to take market share away from cigarettes. Nicotine pouches, Swedish snus, and e-cigarettes are example of this. These aren't any healthy products, but unlike cigarettes, it is products that does not kill. And I have understood that later this event we will hear more details about how the situation looks in my country, Sweden. But let me say this, it is no coincidence that Sweden has the lowest tobacco-related mortality in Europe. So, what do I mean concretely when I say that we should not over-regulate new alternative nicotine products? And I would just like to mention 3 things. First, I think that we should refrain from total bans. Of course, this should be obvious, I would say, but apparently it isn't. Several countries in Europe has implemented total bans on 1 or more novel nicotine products. Here in Belgium, the parliament has recently decided on a ban on nicotine pouches, which will come into force this autumn. Secondly, when the Tobacco Product Directive is revised, we know that an important issue will be the regulation of flavorings in alternative nicotine products. Many want to introduce a total ban on flavoring in the same way that we already cover cigarettes with a kind of ban. But again, if we do want new nicotine products to be able to take a market share from traditional cigarettes, flavor bans, I think, is a very bad idea. Thirdly and lastly, taxation. Controlling people's lifestyles with the help of taxes is an established political practice. If something is bad for the individual or for the society, it is generally taxed more than something that is beneficial for society or the individual. Books, for instance, is among the least taxed products in the European Union. Although I myself, and I can, and sure many of you have many reservations to this way of politically controlling and directing the population, we still have to accept that this is how our tax systems are structured. And given this, the way that we tax nicotine products should also reflect how dangerous the different products are. Cigarettes are more dangerous than, for example, e-cigarettes, and this should be reflected in how we tax these different products. So, from the EU perspective, this should guide, I think, the coming question of the revision of the Tobacco Taxation Directive. And I think I will stop there for now, and I do look forward to having a very interesting discussion later on these important issues. So, thank you very much.
Does it work? It works. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. I also like to thank my colleagues for also being here to discuss a very important topic. So when we speak about cancer, I think that's the most important issue related to tobacco. The first important figure that was emphasized, for instance, in Europe's Beating Cancer Plan is that 40% of cases of cancer are preventable. And also, if you look at the number of cancer cases related to tobacco, it amounts to around 27%, which means that definitely tobacco and smoking is the major source of cancer, major cause of cancer, as something that really needs to be addressed to a very large extent. And since we know that prevention is the most cost-effective type of healthcare, we said that many times, this is precisely the reason why Europe's Beating Cancer Plan relies so heavily on the prevention. What we try to do in the Special Committee on Beating Cancer also was try to make a report which would really reflect these priorities and see how we can achieve the goal that was stated by the Commission, and that is to have less than 5% prevalence of cancer by 2040. Since we are now at around 25% in the European Union, this means that we have really a lot of work that has to be done. When we speak about all the possibilities and all the policies, we can actually see that traditional policies really do not work to an enough extent, I would say. So in terms of bans, in terms of increased taxation, etc., there is some effect, but definitely I think that we should think of what are the other alternatives and what are the other types of policies that we have not tried so far that can really achieve this objective. And of course, also sharing best practices. I think Sweden is a good example of a best practice, is definitely something that should be looked at. This is why we said and in the Becker report, why the alternatives to smoking, the so-called harm reduction instruments should not be set aside. We should really seriously consider them. But of course, we need facts. We need data. We need studies which really show that this is something which really can help. Of course, when we speak about these alternatives, it's always the question of the comparator. So if we compare the person who uses these alternatives to somebody who does not use anything at all, like myself, for instance, then definitely it's much healthier not to use anything. That's not the question. That's, I think, pretty obvious. But I think the crucial question is whether we should also compare the person who is using cigarettes, who is smoking, and whether these alternatives can make this person switch to the alternatives, which are and then compare the alternatives with cigarettes. And we can see if we compare alternatives with cigarettes, that definitely the effect is much weaker in terms of health adverse effects when compared to cigarettes. So definitely this is the main reason why these alternatives need to be considered. Why we have to see, of course, we need more studies, we need more data, but they should definitely not be cast aside right away. They should definitely be taken into consideration as a way for people to switch from smoking, which is the worst thing that they can do, to alternatives which are less harmful. Of course, the main objection or the main problem with this approach that was stated during negotiations in the Becker committee was the question whether these novel products can be seen as a gateway to smoking. And that's the crucial thing. So when we create policies, when we create policies and try to establish policies in order to reduce smoking, we should really make sure that these products are not used, especially for teenagers, for young people, as a gateway to smoking, as an incentive and the first step towards smoking. So so we had a lot of discussions on flavors, for instance. So this is something that is very important. So that flavors are not used which can attract people, especially young people, to something like this, and then of course to the cigarettes as a second step. But I think definitely this should be part of the discussion. The alternatives should be analyzed on its own merits. They should be compared not to the situation of a person who does not use anything at all, but the person who are actually smoking, and see whether this can really be an alternative. Can we get a lot of people to switch from cigarettes to the alternatives, and what will be the final health effect in the end? But also, what is also important is that we make sure that these products are not used as an incentive, as a cause for people to start smoking who have not used anything before, especially young people. So I think this kind of a balanced approach is needed, but we need to have discussions on that. We need to have facts-based and not ideological discussions. So we really have to look at the data. I think the Swedish example is a very interesting example that should be analyzed. It really shows that these novel products and focus on alternatives can work, can have a result, can lead to better health outcomes, and this I think is definitely a good approach. But as I said, so focus on the facts, to focus on the data, and again to see what the final effects of certain policies are, and not just to set aside some ideas right away at the start without even considering them. So this is what I wanted to say. So thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and also look forward to the further discussion.
Thank you very much. And then, yes.
Already on. All right. Thank you for inviting me and all of us for this event. That's very important. A very important subject that I think should be talked much more about. So I will start with, because people always ask me, why do I support this? And also because I'm not using any tobacco or nicotine products at all. I have never done it. I have only tried all of the products once, but I've never liked it. So, so the thing is that for me, like I think everyone agrees about that cigarette is a problem, and we I think everyone wants to somehow, that cigarette's going to be gone somehow. And then to do that, we need to find an alternative, because you will not make people just stop smoking like this. I can take an example for that, how hard it is, because my dad stopped smoking. And the problem is when you smoke, it's not only the nicotine, it's also the habit. You do this, you do this. So you need to get rid of that as well. So he stopped, but he still used a cigarette to do this. And then he used nicotine pouches, so he got the nicotine. And in that way, he got rid of the behavior, and he could stop. And I know it's a lot of people who have the same problem. So we need an alternative to help people to stop. And also, one other reason I also believe in this is that I believe strongly in the inner market. If cigarettes is legal, then all other products that are equal should also be legal. Otherwise, we don't have an inner market, because you cannot say tomorrow we ban vodka, but you can have gin and you can have whiskey. Or even you can say that we will have vodka, but we ban beer and wine that have lesser amount of alcohol, that's less harmful if you use it in a bigger amount. So in that way also, I don't believe in the ban of snus or now the ban of nicotine pouches. But the main focus is that we need to have an alternative to make people stop smoking. And Sweden have been a very good example like that. You have heard it's only 5.6%. And I think also Sweden have been good in this because it's also a cultural thing. Because in an event we had this morning, I got the numbers that 200 years ago the Swedes started to use snus. And that have been in the tradition, so that's why they are more open to snus, and why even the governments will support the snus and fight for it in EU. And also in Sweden it have been so cultural, so smoking is something, yeah, if you're young and you're out clubbing and you want to go out you need nicotine, then you don't want to go out and smoke, because it's complicated, you miss something, it's cold. Then it's better to have a nicotine pouch or snus. And also, it's also connected now to your education. Mostly nowadays, you only smoke if you don't have a higher education. Because I know at university, we had some smokers, they learned quick to stop smoking, otherwise they were not socially accepted at the university anymore. Now I also would use UK as a good example, because they have been promoting vapes now to make people quit smoking. So they have been giving out vapes for free, and also money for nicotine, so they can buy that for filling up the vapes. I think that's actually a very good model, and good for conservative governments to do that. And I think we could do the same in other countries, but for the countries to choose themselves if they want to promote snus, they want to promote nicotine pouches, just something to make the people have the choice. Or like a tax break, like you said, for products. So it's good that we give the people a choice to make their own decisions and not say, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. Maybe I should stop there so I don't talk too much, because I got eager now.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for coming. It's great to meet new people and also see some good friends. Peter kindly introduced me, my name is Federico Fernández. I am the director of We Are Innovation. We Are Innovation is a network of more than 30 think tanks, NGOs, and foundations born originally in Latin America almost 3.5 years ago, and then rapidly expanded to the rest of the Americas, to Europe, and hopefully this year to the Indo-Pacific region as well, and the GCC. That's what we are aiming for. As the name clearly states, we are a pro-innovation alliance. We believe that innovation is what allows us to, as citizens, to get ourselves involved in problem solving. And we are not only, let's say, about these kind of topics, but I'll go in a few minutes why we are doing specifically this. But just to give you an idea, our latest original report has to do with fintech technology and how it's helping a lot of people who are unbanked. For instance, in Latin America, 40% of people, of adults, do not have a bank account, with all the marginalization that that entails. Around the globe is closer to 50, so it's even worse than in Latin America. And thanks, let's say, basically to fintech technology and these things, we can include a lot of people. We have also recently produced a video about the story of electric vehicles produced in Vietnam and sold in California at half price, and we think this is a wonderful parable of free trade, peace, globalization, and innovation. And we're currently working on a sustainable mobility index for cities. What we like to pick are topics that are both highly innovative and also have a deep human impact. And in part, that's why, let's say, we celebrate so much what's going on in Sweden. And we think that the story of Sweden is related very much to innovation. Can we go to the third one? Because with this ethos in mind, please let me, and I'm a little bit, ashamed that I'll be sharing the Swedish story. I mean, that's a seed with, Swedish MEPs and, maybe some other people from Sweden, but well, please feel free to correct me and criticize me afterwards. But let me share how we see what's going on in Sweden. First, just a quick detour. Smoke-free is not a new concept. Smoke-free, I'm sure we all know, but just in case, a smoke-free society or a smoke-free country is a country that has prevalence of smoking of 5% or less. That's the goal of the European Union for 2040, by the way. And the European Union has done, and the World Health Organization have been doing a lot of things, have been implementing policies in order to achieve a smoke-free status and in order to fight tobacco consumption. In Europe, of course, there's the TPD, the Tobacco Products Directive. There's also the, sorry, I don't know the names, I don't remember by heart, the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, and the World Health Organization has the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control and also the Empower measures. However, I think we all can agree that there's a lot of, let's say, ground or ahead of us, a lot of road ahead of us, because smoking prevalence, for instance, in the European Union is 23%. Can we go to the next one? But in Sweden is 5.6% or perhaps less, and rapidly declining and going to be, it's a nice picture, by the way. Yeah, I'll have a few graphs. I try not to have too much text, so so it's less boring. Sweden is on the road to becoming a smoke-free society. And it's very funny, this year, which is 2 years before their own goal and 17 years before the goal of the European Union. So this caught our attention. We think we can learn a lot of lessons from this. And a few things, let's go to the next one, that these are the things I would like to share. And in particular, there is something that we think it's cornerstone of the Swedish model, which is that we believe that Sweden found the missing piece in order to fight tobacco consumption. And by the way, we are not prohibitionists, but of course, like everybody, we understand that smoking combustion cigarettes is not the best you can do for your health or lungs, and I wouldn't buy cigarettes for my children. So it's good to have an alternative. And why? What's the missing piece? Let me show you. Sweden has been a very good student, and let's say we celebrate that, regarding everything, implementing policies and ideas that come both from the European Union, from the World Health Organization. Sweden has also invested heavily in order to educate the population about the risks of smoking, but Sweden has also allowed, and this is, let's say, an old tradition in Sweden regarding, let's say, nicotine, you could say, has allowed innovators to do what they do best, which is improving our lives. In Sweden, snus was a magnificent innovation, which is now a couple of 100 years old, but nicotine pouches are also a Swedish innovation. And in Sweden, there are other innovative nicotine products that we believe are the missing piece that put the puzzle all together in order to defeat smoking. If we can go to the next one. Thank you. We wanted to know, let's say, as I said, we are exploring this road that Sweden has been going through, and what best to ask the people who have walked the path themselves. And that's why a couple of months ago, we commissioned Ipsos, which is a renowned opinion poll company, to do a survey. It's, by the way, published. I won't show you the full study because of matters of time. It's published on our website, weareinnovation.global. But we commissioned Ipsos to run a poll on ex-smokers who switched to alternative nicotine products, to innovative nicotine products, and we wanted to know their view about certain issues because we thought we could learn a lot about that from them. The first thing that we learned, and I think it's, let's say, for all of us here, it's quite obvious, is that why ex-smokers switch? Well, health is the main reason. They want to find an alternative that is not as harmful as smoking combustion cigarettes. It's interesting that, of course, financial aspects play a role. Social aspects do as well, and the MEP Nissinen was mentioning some. And I want to highlight this. In the case of women, they play a bigger role than in the case of men. And this is something we found. There are certain divergences between, can we go to the next one? That we found that I want to highlight, and I also want to show you how we see innovation has addressed those issues as well. This is from the general population, another important factor for ex-smokers is to be available to access a wide range of innovative nicotine products. Snus in Sweden is still extremely important, but nicotine pouches, vaping, for instance, are gaining ground and are becoming more relevant. And if snus is king in Sweden, nicotine pouches are the queen because they are the preferred product of women. And Sweden, by the way, had the very weird situation that in Sweden, women tend to smoke more than men, and probably it has to do with certain aspects of snus, which is some like tobacco powder, which can look quite horribly. And nicotine pouches came to solve this situation. And for instance, vaping is twice as popular as in women than in men. And if we can go to the next one, another interesting issue is that asked about if they could access the flavor of choice, 50% of women said that they found this very important in comparison to only 37% of men. And asked about the levels of nicotine, more than a third of women said that this was very important in comparison to less than a quarter of men. Why I highlight these things? Because I think these divergences also show that there are certain gender sensitivities that should be taken into consideration at the time of fighting tobacco, and we believe innovation addresses these gender-specific needs. And this poll shows it, and the availability of different products shows it. If we can go to, thank you very much. Now, responses, and I'll finish, I try to finish in a couple of minutes, don't worry. Responses regarding this is the general population. Again, it's extremely important to find the products both in certain flavors and in different levels of, not in certain flavors, but in flavors and in certain levels of nicotine. Of course, the ones allowed, but that's important. We believe this makes the products acceptable to the people who are trying to make the switch. Another issue, and this was mentioned by MEP Skyttedal, sorry if I'm butchering your name, but taxation, but I mean, what we ask here is about affordability. And ex-smokers claim that they found it key that alternative nicotine products, innovative products of nicotine, are priced competitively and are ideally cheaper than cigarettes. And this definitely relates both with creating a market in which these products can compete, and also how you tax them. And I'll go back to this in a second. And last but not least, there is the issue, of how to access these products. And it's important, again, this is let's say, a no-brainer, but can we go to the previous one? Sorry. The ex-smoker said that it's important. 54% claim that it was important or very important that these products are available in numerous stores, and almost half of them said that it was also important for them to buy them online. Now, I'll wrap. There are only a couple of slides, and I'll wrap up. Just to compress everything that I told you, these are the key factors that we find. I want to just highlight the last two because I really think are extremely important. We think that we cannot ignore, like probably in everything in life, there's a need for a certain personalized approach in order to fight tobacco smoking. And in particularly, there are certain gender sensitivities that should be taken into consideration. And as I said, I believe innovation really caters to those needs, and this is extremely important. And the second thing, and this was even highlighted by a former Minister of Finance of Sweden, a gentleman named Mikael Damberg. In Sweden, combustion cigarettes, the normal cigarettes, are taxed way higher than snus because of the level of risk or of safety, or however you want to measure them. Can we go to this is almost the last one. Just a couple of conclusions. We think that what we would like to, let's say the couple of ideas we would like to leave you, I would like to leave you after this. Sweden, the secret sauce of Sweden in a way is like, it's like Sweden is like a good author wine. It's a good blend, and it's a blend of tradition and innovation. It has applied some of the ideas most of the ideas coming from the World Health Organization, from the European Union, and from other, let's say, more traditional policy approach towards smoking cessation. And those work to a certain extent. But the key issue, as we see it, and the angular stone in which the whole edifice stands, is also allowing alternative nicotine products in order to solve the problem of smoking. And this is extremely related to the second point, which is the achievements of Sweden. Because the achievements of Sweden are basically that they have become a smoke-free country, or they are going to become in a couple of weeks, literally. I mean, it's going to happen. This is 17 years before the European Union. And in close relationship to this, smoking-related diseases in Sweden are way lower than in the rest of Europe. The same, and I don't want to bore you with all the statistics. By the way, Smoke-Free Sweden has done an amazing job compiling all this information, and you can find it online at smokefreesweden.com. Cancer rates related for lung cancer, things like that, are way lower than the rest of Europe, and cancer overall is way lower than the rest of Europe, and probably Chris will tell us a little bit more about that. So these are really substantial achievements. And the last, we have today a country that has become smoke-free. I think there are valuable lessons that we can learn. There's a lot we can learn from the path they have taken to becoming a smoke-free society. And let's hope we all get inspired by them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you all today. So I don't need to introduce myself again. Dr. Christopher Russell, behavioural psychologist from Scotland. I'll try and use my best English here today. Please tell me if I'm sounding too Scottish. I'd like to start by addressing perhaps the foremost health outcome by which the success of all tobacco control policies and measures are judged, and that is the incidence of smoking attributable cancer in the population. And in contrast to Federico, I'm more than happy to bore you with the statistics, which is what I'm going to do for the next 30 minutes, 5 minutes. And just to touch on something that the MEP said earlier, I feel also important to say that I, in my lifetime, have never tried a tobacco or nicotine product, never smoked a cigarette, never vaped an e-cigarette, never tried snus, nicotine pouches, never anything. So I get the question quite a lot, what is my interest in this area? And the easy answer to that is to say I've never personally used or benefited from tobacco or nicotine products, but I've seen a lot of people with lung cancer, and I've spoken to a lot of sons and daughters whose mothers and fathers are going through lung cancer, and it's a horrible thing. And unfortunately, there's probably people in this room who have had a similar experience or knowledge of a family or a family member or friend or colleague who is going through or has gone through lung cancer, but hopefully not too many, and hopefully fewer in the future. So my interest in this broad field is about, well, at its broadest level, helping people to quit smoking at the soonest opportunity so that they may go on to live long, healthy, happy lives with their children and their parents. It sounds very sort of broad and idealistic, but ultimately that is the reason for why I'm in this field. So just to focus specifically first on lung cancer, which is the most commonly diagnosed type of cancer and the leading cause of cancer death in the European Union. So in 2017, nearly 250,000 people died from lung cancer in the EU, which accounts for about 1/5 of all deaths from cancer and about 5% of the total number of deaths in 2017. And nearly all lung cancer, about 80 to 90% of diagnoses, are caused by cigarette smoking. And we know that, we have long known that cigarette smoke contains around 70,000 compounds, of which we know at least 60 cause cancer. And the major pathways by which the inhalation of this toxic mixture of chemicals through cigarette smoke causes cancer are well established. And now there are strong epidemiological data, both from within the European Union and beyond, that show that the most effective way to reduce the incidence of cancer in society is to reduce the prevalence of cigarette smoking. And indeed, the progress that several EU member states have made in the past several decades in reducing overall cancer mortality has been driven in substantial part by declines in lung cancer mortality, which in turn have been attributable to two factors: continuous reductions in the proportion of adults in the population who smoke cigarettes, and to improved cancer treatment outcomes. So the reason why we're here today, in what has been a bleak start to my presentation, I'm now going to hopefully turn to something a bit more positive, which is to celebrate what Sweden has achieved in the past 10 or 20 years. Sweden, as has been said several times now, has achieved the lowest prevalence of daily cigarette smoking in the European Union. And with the proportion of adults who smoke expected to fall below 5% before the end of this year, Sweden will, by the EU's own definition, be the first EU member state to achieve a smoke-free society. And as Federico touched upon, not only is Sweden to be congratulated for being the first country to become smoke-free in the European Union, but this achievement should be marvelled at, roundly applauded, for having occurred 17 years prior to the EU's 2040 target and 2 years ahead of Sweden's own target for achieving that prevalence level. And more than that, Sweden has the lowest level of youth smoking, or smoking among young people in Europe, with only around 3% of persons aged 16 to 29 years currently smoking cigarettes. And to put that into context, the European Union average for smoking among young people, again 16 to 29 years, is about 18%. So Sweden's youth smoking rate, the EU average is around 6 times higher than the level in Sweden. To put it in a bit more context, the youth smoking rates in Germany and Italy are higher than 20%. So Sweden is to be congratulated not only for becoming the first smoke-free society, but also for now beginning to raise what is the first smoke-free generation. Now, parallel to Sweden's success in reducing smoking prevalence over the past several decades, in 2017, Sweden was only one of 5 EU member states to record standardised death rates for lung cancer that were below 40 per 100,000 inhabitants, the other 4 member states being Finland, Portugal, Malta and Cyprus. And by comparison, the EU standardised death rate for lung cancer was considerably higher at around 52 persons per 100,000. And additionally, as Federico also touched upon, Sweden has by far the lowest standardised death rates for males at around 35 per 100,000 inhabitants, and that is considerably lower than the rate of any other member state, with the next lowest death rate being 51 per 100,000 inhabitants, and that's in Malta. So how has Sweden achieved this smoke-free society, and with it reaped the benefits of a dramatic reduction in the incidence of overall cancer mortality, driven in large part by steep declines in lung cancer mortality? So before I give it what is the simple plain answer, I just want to point out that the overarching goal of tobacco control policy in any government, in any jurisdiction, ultimately is to help save lives and prevent disease as rapidly as possible. Healthcare providers, regulators and policymakers have, and I don't use the word lightly, have a duty, I believe, to develop, innovate and ultimately offer ever more safe and effective ways of quitting smoking to their citizens. And that involves committing to research, population surveillance, keeping an open mind as to what might hurt or what might help more people to quit smoking, and as best as can be achieved, always follow the evidence wherever that may take you, whether that's to restrictive legislation or more permissive legislation. Whatever will get you to, a Swedish standard of 5% or fewer of the population smoking as quick as possible. Whatever products and methods help a government or a body to achieve that should be seriously considered. So it's important that we understand, as was the lesson from Federico's presentation, it's important that we understand how Swedes are quitting smoking, how the Swedish policy environment encourages and assists adult smokers to quit, and how, perhaps most importantly, the key pillars that have underpinned Sweden's success can be applied in other EU member states to make quitting smoking achievable for the millions of EU citizens who smoke. And to answer the question of how has Sweden achieved this EU first in reaching a smoke-free population, the answers, Federico has got there before me, is fairly simple. They permit widespread retail availability of a variety of cigarettes alternatives or nicotine-based alternatives that adult smokers find satisfying and appealing, and appropriately priced to compete with cigarettes in the marketplace. And these products are generally sold everywhere that cigarettes are sold, so on any shop wall where cigarettes are available, 3, 4, 5 alternatives to cigarettes are available right next to them. And that is a critical element in driving behaviour change, positive behaviour change, is, as Federico pointed out, ensuring that these alternatives to cigarettes are appealing and satisfying, affordable relative to cigarettes, and accessible, especially in communities that are more deprived, where smoking rates are higher, where those people are more susceptible to smoking-related harm. So yeah, just to summarise, those 3 key pillars of products being appealing, affordable, and accessible to adults who smoke. And to echo something that one of the MEPs said earlier, choice is a major factor in Sweden's success and now in the UK's success in driving down smoking. If as humans, we're all driven by similar basic principles. We want to have the maximum pleasure with the minimum risk in anything we do in life. If we can get more enjoyment out of something while doing it more and more safely, we will choose that behaviour, that substance, that product. And a key for other member states to rival Sweden or to catch up with Sweden is the focus on innovation, to innovate the marketplace with increasingly more appealing, increasingly more effective and satisfying alternatives to cigarettes that more and more smokers can find something that suits their needs and wants in different moments in life. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions.
For MEP Sokol, I notice you're also a lecturer in health law, and it struck me what has been discussed. The fact that Sweden serves as some kind of a control group is not mere coincidence or cultural preference, or not even a deliberate policy by the government only. In EU law, snus is specifically banned, and Sweden is the only EU member state that enjoys an exemption. So my question is, given the stark figures, I think it was 23% versus 5.6%, in your experience in the sort of the health policy community, is there any openness, or is there increasing openness to looking at this again? Was it really wise to go this way, or not?
Yes. Yes, I think the crucial issue here is the position of the European Commission, because the European Court of Justice, in one of its judgments, actually gave the Commission the autonomy to decide, taking into account all of the facts, etc., on how to approach this. So I think the crucial thing is the European Commission, and there, as I said, you have this approach of really saying all of these alternatives are less healthy than not using anything at all. So that's the approach, which of course is true, but as I said, the question is of the comparators. So whether you should compare alternatives like snus with not using anything, or comparing them with cigarettes and people switching from cigarettes. So definitely the Commission has up until now had a pretty negative stance on this, and I think that's the main reason. In the Parliament, when we were discussing this cancer report, it was more, let's say, balanced, more divided. So there were different positions on that, and I think in the end the final report was much more balanced than maybe we could expect. So definitely in the Parliament, I think there is more complex approach, taking into account different positions much more than in the European Commission. Of course, as Sara said, the European Union has concrete tools to act. So one is the question of marketing the product itself, and the other is indirect taxation. We know that taxation is primarily a national competence, with the exception of indirect taxation. So indirect taxation, like excise duties and VAT, are to a large extent harmonized on the EU level. So this is the most concrete instrument by which EU, so these two sets of rules, so one on taxation, another on marketing, these are the most important instruments which EU can use to actually direct the future policy, because it influences whether you can put something on the market, under which conditions, and how much it costs, right? So I think so EU definitely has a big role to play there, but definitely up until now, Commission has had a very negative stance towards this, and we'll see whether this will change, whether additional data will be taken into consideration to have a more balanced approach on this.
All right, thank you. Well, it brings me to Sara. Your party is in the Swedish government. Is the Swedish government keen to become some kind of a promoter of its own model, or is it more sort of let's say, shy to do so?
I think it's quite clear that from a Swedish perspective, the European approach doesn't make much sense to ban a product that for us has shown quite obviously has fewer tobacco-related deaths. So I think we do hope for a more positive approach when these two directives are changed. There was some rumors that the tobacco excise directive would have new minimum levels that would really be damaging for novel products and for Swedish snus. This was then said by the Commission to be false, and we hope that that is the case, because I think to have the same level of taxation on products that are not as dangerous as cigarettes, it would be very damaging approach from the European Union. And I think the European Commission, as Tomislav said, has had a very negative approach, and also the responsible commissioner falsely claimed that Swedish snus causes cancer, which is there is no empirical support for that claim, which I think shows the problematic attitude from the EU point of view.
Yes. Okay. And maybe Chris, you're from Scotland, which is still a part of the UK, I think. So could you explain a bit more where the debate in the UK is going, and perhaps also as an expert, are there any other places? I saw that Australia is very punitive, very restrictive, but perhaps there's countries in the world outside of Europe that are also maybe changing their minds about this.
Yeah. Is it on?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Yeah, we were still part of the UK when I left yesterday, so hopefully my passport's still valid when I go home. You know, there are several countries around the world that are seeing a very marked population level effect of the introduction of new tobacco and nicotine products. Sweden obviously has benefited from a lead time of 200 years in driving down smoking through the widespread availability of snus, and more recently of vaping products and pouches. But you know, that type of effect is not confined to Sweden. We see it happening in Japan and South Korea, where there have been steep declines in adult cigarette smoking prevalence and in cigarette sales, tied to the market introduction of heated tobacco products. So they're good case examples of how the retail availability and promotion, responsible promotion of those alternative products in those countries has really eaten in to cigarette sales and the number of people who are smoking. And the tobacco product manufacturers are recognizing this, that the future is not in combustible products, that there is now an increasing demand across populations for equal satisfaction with far less risk, and that there is now not just one way of delivering that to consumers, but multiple ways, because snus is certainly not for everyone. Vaping is not for everyone. Heated tobacco products not for everyone. But offered together or available on shelves, they will scoop up more and more adult smokers, and even adult smokers who had no intention of quitting smoking. Just the mere availability of these products on shelves at reasonable prices, in flavours that they find appealing, and even flavours they find a bit weird for a nicotine product, is enough for a substantial proportion of smokers to say, I'll give it a try, see what happens. It's only €5, €10, whatever it is, we'll see. And from that level of curiosity and experimentation, with the portfolio of reduced risk products in front of you in your local convenience store or gas station, that's how population level harm reduction then flows. And for a regulator's perspective, and some again mentioned, you know, the role of the market earlier. This is a marketplace solution. This is a solution to one of the most significant health problems that doesn't ultimately cost the government any money. The companies in the market will solve this problem if allowed, again, responsibly and within appropriate boundaries to market their products. So it's not I am not a political person at all, but this is one of those instances, it seems, where if government can just step out of the road a little bit, but keep an eye on the situation, proper responsible surveillance, consumers will choose upon exposure and awareness to these new products. They will increasingly choose them over combustible products. And so we see that in Sweden, Japan, South Korea, the UK now with its pro-tobacco harm reduction approach, primarily through vaping. And my hope is that more and more countries in the EU very simply just follow the leader, copy the winner, just do what they're doing. You will get to your desired outcome faster if you take the lessons from all these countries that are seeing massive reductions in smoking prevalence through switching to these alternatives.
All right, thank you. And Johan, maybe going back to Sweden, so we've been very positive about the Swedish model, but you know, nothing is perfect, so perhaps if there would be some things that still could be improved in Sweden, what do you think should that be?
She has made a joke here, my party being the government, but yeah. That's a tough question, but something I would like to be like more clear, that you can put up all the products and see how dangerous are they, and like really like so the people can see exactly what product should they choose. And then actually somehow like UK promoting the better product to give the people a choice to actually take the better product. That I think will be the best thing to promote, because otherwise we have a good model. So, but it can always be better. Everything can be better.
True. Then let's go to Federico. Federico, you've talked about the consumer-driven approach. Could you maybe develop that a bit more and also explain how we could maybe develop it on other policy challenges?
I'll try. I think that, let's say, in this area and in other areas, but in this, Sweden has really pioneered. Sorry, firstly, you did it at the beginning, but I want to do it at the end. I want to thank our host for hosting us with this event. Sorry that I wanted to say that, and thank you very much, MEP Sokol, for hosting this event. Regarding that, what I would say is that we need to let innovators what they do best. In general, innovators improve our lives. And the other thing that we have to think about innovation is that innovation is not invention necessarily. Sometimes it's recombining things that exist in a different way. It's not that a eureka moment, is that it's popularizing something, bringing costs down. That's what we have to allow. And in that sense, and there are studies regarding this, the ones that come to mind are the ones from Adam Thierer and Steven Isel. The role of people with power positions, with decision makers, regulators, is extremely important, not only, I mean, obviously because of their actions, but also because of what the words. This is studied, the words and of course the actions of people in power do a lot to determine the innovation culture in a country, and in this case, in a continent. So I celebrate that we could have a discussion like the one we had today, and we should, let's say, always keep very open doors and windows to have these discussions. It's important that, let's say, people who want to innovate don't feel that they are perceived as dangerous or some sort of a threat, or people who are under suspicious. If we create an ecosystem, innovation is an ecosystem. If we create an ecosystem that has institutions, both formal and informal, that allow them to do what they do best, well, these are the results, and the results are extremely positive.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Then maybe let's go to the floor now before we move to the reception. So if anybody would like to ask a question, feel free to do so. Just maybe introduce yourself. And yes.
Hi, I'm Michael from the World Vapors Alliance. First of all, I need to say I love it that all speakers stress the importance of choice and variety. That's music to consumers use, obviously. But I would like to ask another question, especially to the MEPs, because also all of you mentioned the actual harms done by cigarettes. But when we look at the regulatory process within the EU, it feels from the outside a lot of times that the actual harms get lost and we get dragged into side discussions and side hustles, and we talk about small things and lose the actual goal, namely reducing the harm from cigarettes out of sight. And I would like to know, what do you think could we do from the outside to push your colleagues into the direction of looking at actual harms and then looking for practical solutions like the Swedish model?
All right, who wants to chip in?
Maybe I can shortly. I mean, yeah, of course, you know how the legislative procedure works. We don't have the right of legislative initiative, so we cannot propose new laws. Only Commission can do that. But as I think there's more diversity of opinions in the Parliament than in the Commission in general, which is a good thing. But raising awareness, talking to people, presenting studies, organizing events, I think these are all of the things that should be done in general to try to acquaint people with a certain topic. So definitely the more discussions that we have, the better. And I think why not having also events where you have different positions, different sides, different opinions to exchange the arguments, and then somebody listening from outside who is neutral can actually make up their own mind. So I think this kind of an approach, having more discussion, more dialogue, is crucial.
All right. Anybody else who has a question or a remark? Yes.
Yeah, this is Carlo Martuscelli from Politico. I had a question for Dr. Russell, just regarding snus. Now, Sweden isn't the only country where snus is legal. In the U.S., for example, they also have snus, and I believe it's used more in the U.S. South than the north of the United States. I don't think we see any big divergence in smoking rates. I don't know the data, maybe I'm wrong. So I just wanted to know how idiosyncratic is Sweden. I mean, we also mentioned the climate. You know, people don't want to go outside and smoke. I know Sweden has very high taxes. Imagine taxes on cigarettes are very, very high. So I just wonder really how much Sweden is instructive for the rest of Europe or the world.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. There will be globally, regionally, cultural differences in the use and appeal of all of these different harm reduction products. Snus will have a great impact in some parts of the world, moderate in other parts of the world, limited or zero impact in other parts of the world. So the question you're asking is what is likely to be the size of the benefit for US versus Sweden or other populations who adopt it? I would say obviously that's why we do research, we do population surveillance. We don't just propose throwing a product into a market and saying let it be, whatever happens. We will put it in and monitor it very carefully to make sure being used by the right people, not being used by the wrong people. If we see any red flags, we would make recommendations for the withdrawal or the changing restrictions or imposing more restrictions and so on. Yes, Sweden is probably the country that will benefit most from snus, and the impact will be less elsewhere. I think the big, as Michael said, the big picture here is there will be some people in each population who do choose to use it and will benefit from it. And as long as what we're seeing is the benefits outweighing the risks, however small the benefit is, however small the risk is, as long as we're seeing a net positive effect of the market introduction of snus and other vaping products, etc., then it has a role in reducing tobacco-related harm in that population. But as you correctly say, that net benefit will differ in size across countries and regions.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
May I add something before? Thank you, Chas. Thank you very much for your question. Your question, made me think of my original country, Argentina, in which, let's say, it's like the opposite approach. It's like Argentina is different from all over the world, so everything that works outside of Argentina doesn't work in Argentina because we are so... But this is something that comes again and again, that, there's the Sweden special status. But as I mentioned, and I want to reiterate myself, maybe I wasn't clear enough, sorry, snus is part of the story. In particularly, it's a story that it's way more related to men than to women in Sweden. And smoking rates in Sweden used to be higher for women than for men. And Swedish women do not switch their smoking habit to snus, but to other alternatives, more innovative, more modern, like nicotine pouches. And just to another important, taxes in Sweden probably are high for everything, but besides that, nicotine consumption in Sweden, and Dr. Anders Milton highlights this very well. Nicotine consumption in Sweden is similar, it's very close, I don't know if above or below, the European average. What's changed is the vehicle in which you consume that nicotine.
Did you have a
Had a follow-up question?
If I may, I think almost everyone would agree that if the new products, if it were just a one-to-one substitution, there's no question it would be great. But I think where the worry is especially with the new generations, that maybe we're getting them addicted to products that if things just continued, and we see the smoking rates come down all throughout Europe, not as quickly as in Sweden, but we know that these policies are working, that we're just needlessly getting people hooked to vaping, to snus, to whatever else. And maybe some of those people will eventually switch back to smoking, and that would be a real tragedy.
So several good points there. If 100,000 smokers all switch, 100% switch to vaping or snus or pouches, then the premature death rate will almost disappear, depending on what point in life they make that switch. So there is an argument that the alternatives to cigarettes, in order to compete with cigarettes, need to have an addictive potential. They need to have a hit or a buzz or a kick, something that satisfies the smoker to a level that approximates the level of satisfaction they got from a cigarette. So that's a necessary part of the innovation of the new products. They have to have a hook that prevents people from going back to cigarettes or gives them the reason to stay over on the safer side. So when you say having them needlessly addicted, I think about how do you prevent disease and death as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. The UK government has been very clear on this, that the problem of smoking-related cancer far outweighs the concerns associated with addiction to low-risk nicotine and tobacco products. This is why it's harm reduction, not harm elimination. We are tolerant of a level of harm in order to avoid a much larger harm. So yes, it would be absolutely fantastic if all smokers stopped using all tobacco and nicotine at the soonest opportunity. The reality of the world is few people do that. Quit rates unassisted and with nicotine replacement therapy products are very low over a 12-month period. So the utility or the added value that tobacco harm reduction products brings is to reduce but not eliminate the harm of smoking. So we can have debates, and we will for the next 10 years have debates about how much harm and addiction are we willing to accept in order to reduce cancer rates. So that's a political, scientific, moral debate. But what is undoubted is that if 100,000 people switch to those products, the cancer rate will almost disappear overnight, depending again on when they switch. And just one final point about young people. We often talk about tobacco harm reduction as something which is for older smokers who are experiencing harm from smoking. One of the most important pieces of evidence people in our field are made aware of in studying about smoking cessation, the harms of smoking, is that the age of 35 is a bit of a magic number. If a person can quit smoking before the age of 35, that person can go on to have the life expectancy of a non-smoker. So you quit soon enough in life, you will have the life expectancy and quality of life of a non-smoker. To me, that means that with these alternative products being attractive to 21, 25, 29-year-olds, is they provide a valuable opportunity for tobacco harm prevention, stopping harm before it starts. There's no reason why we should wait until a person has a diagnosis of cancer or cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, before we start thinking tobacco harm reduction might be an option for this person. If we can divert young people, young smokers, out of smoking before harm has accumulated, before addiction has peaked, that's the generation that will go on to not have the same level of cancer diagnosis in their 50s and 60s. So I suppose my encouragement is to policymakers is to not think of use of these products by young people as a bad thing. The likelihood is that young people who use these products will either rarely or never go back to smoking cigarettes, or they will never start smoking cigarettes in the first place. So yes, we can look at it as here are young people using products that are not absolutely safe, of course, but also in the real world of what else they could be doing, there's a significant harm prevention opportunity with the younger generation. And I don't mean underage, I mean legal age adults, young adults using these products, and hopefully, as is the intended purpose of the products, never becoming smokers or never going back to smoking.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, addiction in general doesn't kill people. It's addiction to cigarettes that kill people. I, for myself, I never tried this snus myself either, so I'm one of the anti-tobacco in that way. But I am addicted to caffeine, and this, I don't see this as a legislative problem that should be addressed by policymakers. But addiction to products that are lethal, as cigarettes in a large way are when consumed the way that they are, is a problem. And I think we need to, as I said in my introduction, choose which battle to take. And it's battle towards cancer that should be prioritized, and not battle towards any addictive products. And we need to be clear that this is a choice that we're open to making, and that is something that I think would make sense.
All right, good. Thank you. I believe there was one more question in the back of the room, or maybe yes, yes.
I'm a physician and co-author of the Smoke-Free Sweden talk. A question to Sara, if I may. We are concerned that countries where there's a smoke-free status or an approaching to smoke-free status, that they are not highlighted enough by WHO and even here at the European Union, that proper country case studies are done to understand exactly why there has been such a shift. And I truly respected your political wisdom at the beginning, and I'd very much like to know how you would advise WHO and the European Parliament and how to push WHO to do country case studies to truly understand how the smoke-free status has been achieved. Because more often than not, you get blame shifting, and you get WHO saying, well, it's all about traditional tobacco control, and really the rest is more the industry and conspiracies making it possible for the smoke-free status to be approached. How can we push these big organizations to do proper science and especially focus on the Swedish example?
I do think it's crucial, I think, not only in this policy area, but in general, to have a science-based approach. And I think there I found it very alarming that the EU Commission hasn't been interested in the science about the usage of novel tobacco products and nicotine products as an alternative. And I think, if anything, it will diminish the trust in these institutions, also, of course, the WHO to divert from science in this case. So I think as policymaker on EU level, I think that's what we like to address, and I have numerous times raised this issue within my part of the political spectrum.
Well, thank you very much to coming here, and thank you to the panel and to MEP Sokol for hosting this. So please join me in giving everybody a round of applause.